Hi, friends, and welcome back to the Tiffany Jo Baker podcast, where my heart and hope is that you and I continue to get free and live in such a way that we can wholly pursue our God given why. Each bite sized episode will uplift your soul and success through soul care, simple steps, and strategies straight from heaven for your heart hurts, your hellholes, and your healing, enabling you to accomplish all the things God has called and created you to do, step by step and season by season. Hi, y'all, and welcome back to the Tiffany Jo Baker podcast. Today, you want to stay tuned as I have a special guest here today who is literally in the fight every day for people's freedom and healing. And today, she's going to be sharing about trauma-based mind control and programming and how Jesus has prepared the way for his kids to get free. And so, Kelly Hawley, thank you for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me, Tiffany. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to having our chat.
Me too. I mean, I know we just were talking and I'm like, oh my goodness, I could ask you all of these questions as I've been recently in a similar ministry type uh, occupation, calling. I don't, so many things we could address that as. Um, but you have been in this a lot longer than I have, and you are the founder and executive director of Warrior Bride Ministries, where for years y'all have been working with those who have been victims of ritual abuse, trafficking, mind control, and things of the like. And I know anybody who is in this field has a story of how God led them to this. So, if you'd be open to sharing a little bit about your story, about what led you to this type of work and ministry, and then we'll kind of dive into trauma-based mind control and what that means.
Sounds great.
Mhm.
Okay, so basically, I am a product of a divorced family, like so many of us out there. And it was at a key age. I was around 8 years old, and that's an age is just kind of crucial. And so the divorce really hit me hard. And then as my parents journeyed into their new world of exploration, my mother was dating some, and um, through that, there was access to me,
Mhm.
and I was sexually abused. Um, that set me on a trajectory of a life that was not the one that I was ordained or destined to be. It was one where there was a wound, and in that wound, the enemy could work from.
Mhm.
And I was continuously, looking for love. I didn't know what love was because the perpetrators are so good at confusing you with that because they're such manipulators. So I was looking for love. I was looking for acceptance. I was just looking to heal this wound that was inside of me.
Mhm.
And so I went through life. When you're young, you're just going through life. You don't know, you're just trying to figure out things, and your brain is in a different development state than it is when you're older. But even as I got older and started to go to high school, I can remember thinking, well, so far I haven't gotten, this wound healed. So what I'll do is I'll just do whatever it takes to be, for people to love me. I will be friendly with everybody, even if I don't think the person's, treating me right. I will still be good to them just so I have friends, and I
Mhm.
was very popular, and I also was like, well, if I do this and I do that and I do this, and then I'll be loved. So I did everything you could possibly be in school. I was, president of class for 4 years, cheerleader, prom queen, all these things, that you try to do to fill those holes. And then that it continued into college. And, some things ultimately look good to the world because I was a workaholic, and I was very successful. I was perfectionist, so things were done right. And, all this, but some did not look good to the world. But, I was trying everything, alcohol, some drugs, men, whatever it was. I was just trying to find something to get healing. And eventually I hit my rock bottom. And in hitting that rock bottom, I called out to Yeshua, Jesus Christ, And he answered. It wasn't a magic wand, but it was the beginning of a journey with him. And I can actually remember that there was a war. I could feel the war over my body for my soul. But I did choose right. Praise the, praise the Lord. And I
Hmm.
got on my knees and called out to him. And that went on a major journey. And that was probably, um, close to 30 years ago, 25 years ago, something like that. And I took it very, very serious. I just ate up my Bible. I just was determined to figure out um, if this was the way, what it said, what the answers were, just really immersed myself. And I'll never forget that the enemy just so came at me when I was going to get baptized, and people just coming out of the woodworks of, you know, you're doing the wrong thing, this is the worst day of my life, just crazy stuff. It makes no sense. How is it the worst day of your life? Because I'm getting baptized. But at the same time, you're thinking, well, am I confused on this too? So, but I just continued that journey, and eventually he did a mighty, work in me. It just was like peeling an onion and just kind of continuously peeling an onion. And I finally got to a place where he felt like I was released to serve. It was time for me to take what I'd learned and help others now. So I started serving in a lot of different ways, missions and all kinds of stuff. But one of the places he planted me, it stayed with me to the point where I do it, and have done it for the last 20 years, is serving the sexually abused, ministering healing to them, doing healing retreats and all kinds of things. And so, in that time of the last 20 years, at first I thought it was going to be people like me that had more of the more common sexual abuse. Um, and at first, that's what I thought they all were. But then it started to unfold, and there was trafficking. And then it started to unfold, and we just got some really crazy stories from a lot of people, but they had commonality in it. And there was some manifestations associated with it. And I was kind of like, what is this? What's going on, and what does the Lord want us to do? Because again, I will be diligent in it and try to figure it out. And so that was probably 11 years ago, I think, when we encountered what we knew now to be SRA. Now, the funny thing about that is some of the people that I ministered to way back when, 20 years ago, are coming back around now because we didn't understand how to help them then. We didn't know. But now they realize the reason I didn't get my full healing is because I've got all of this that needs to be dealt with. So, anyways, we found Kate Tolman back then. That was the only one I could find. There's a few others I know now that were doing work back then, but they're very scarce. But we found Kate Tolman, who is a survivor of SRA and is speaking out and teaching. And we went across the country and went to her intensive or training, whatever she was calling it then. And I just remember my eyes being just wide open, like, what? Because she got very deep into the mind and the delta and the theta and the beta and all these things. Like, I had no idea this existed. So I took that and got all the material, and then I continued on my journey of understanding. And then the Lord started sending me some very, very high up mind control, experimentation, mothers of darkness, all these kind of things. And I had to really learn through experience, and just kind of jumping in the deep end. And I'm so many mistakes looking back now. It was an interesting journey, but that's why we're in the middle of writing a training manual so that people can try to avoid what I had to go through. Because honestly, looking back, I'm lucky that I made it out. But I made mistakes. I didn't have good boundaries, which is a really important thing. I didn't see the weakness in my attachment style, it's things like that, which all these things I learned as I'm now teaching them. But those are key, especially for people who have been through trauma. But there's so much more to it as well. So, anyways, so it evolved into um, about 6 years ago, me starting Warrior Bride Ministry, because about 2 years prior to that, I was trying to partner with people. I was going to churches, I was going to Fivefold Ministry, trying to get them to make a space for these people, and they weren't interested. So eventually the Lord said, you need to get an office and start this ministry. And I did. And it's been a waiting list ever since. So yeah, there's such a need.
Wow. Yes, I was going to say, I think one of the big things that I heard throughout your story is how much more common this type of abuse and healing uh, is needed than we knew. Like you said, it started with sexual abuse, more common types of sexual abuse, and realized there was more to a lot of the people's story than known. And I think that's one of the things as I've been diving into this type of ministry too, is how much more commonplace
Mm,
ritual abuse, mind control, the deep darkness of generational bloodlines are than what a lot the common everyday Christian realizes or knows or person. So it really is eye-opening as you get into it, how deep and dark it really is. But God, and it's what
okay.
we are thankful for. So,
Absolutely.
I know I could have you talk on so many different topics,
Right.
but we're here to talk specifically about trauma-based mind control. So,
Okay.
what is that? Can you tell us what is it?
Well, as we talked about the sexual abuse and stuff, I kind of look at the trauma related to any form of sexual abuse on a spectrum. And so
Mhm.
the trauma-based mind control would be on the far right spectrum. The only thing that would be maybe a little bit farther than that would be ritual abuse slash trauma-based mind controls slash medical experimentation,
Mhm.
which several have gone through all of that because there is a common link, but they do test the person, the child, because they're babies when they encounter them are very young. That one of their sayings is get a child before 8 or it's too late. But they're going for as early as possible, and they're starting to do it even in the womb. So they test them, and that test can really determine partially where you end up on that spectrum. Also, it depends on which group is doing this to you because they have commonality, but some differences. So, in that testing, they might determine they don't have any major gifts that we are looking for or that that we can really utilize. So um, they're going to be ritually abused. They're going to be a sacrifice, or they have this. So we're going to use them for the trafficking to make the money with the trafficking, or they're going to be a drug mule, or they're going to be a gun runner, or they're going to be whatever it is. And then those that they determine, hey, they have some really great gifts that we want that we're looking for. They have the theta, which the theta is like the mind, like the telepathy and stuff, or the remote viewing and stuff like that. Or hey, they have really good looking and intelligence. They can be a beta sex kitten, so we'll send them in as a spy and stuff. Or they're very they have a gift of being like a Delta assassin, like the foundation of that. So that's what we're going to train them to be. And all that can determine on where you end up being. Um, the medical experimentation, I'm not 100% sure how they decide who that is. I know that a lot of them end up having like doctors or nurses in their families, but I don't know if that's like I doubt that's the determining factor, but it does seem to have a commonality to it. So anyways, in that, and depending on your age, because this has evolved in terms of the mechanisms they use to do this. So it kind of depends on the age of you when this happened, but they will do various forms of torture, and they will manipulate, extreme manipulation. They could dress up in outfits. Well, and maybe one's dressed up like Yeshua, Jesus, while they're, raping them. And so the whole goal, ultimately, part of the goal is to keep them away from Yeshua, that he can never redeem them, like for them never to know him. So they continuously manipulate um, the way that they look at Yeshua. Oh, call on him and he'll never respond, or look at he's the one raping you, or look at how weak he is as they're dressed up. They do things like that, and they also just do horrific things, and they make them do horrific things, and so that what they're going through is so drastic that their mind splits. Dissociation is something that the Lord had put in our design, to deal with the more natural trauma that would occur in this life, but the enemy has manipulated it. And so he's purposely traumatizing them so that they will split into these different parts. So it's called DID, and it used to be the multiple personalities. But what will happen in that trauma is a part of their soul and their mind will split off. It will go behind amnesic walls. That part will be arrested in time. Say it happened at 4 years old. By the time it comes forth for any healing, they will talk like a 4 year old. Um, they will carry this memory. Now, some of the other parts will get very, very trained so that when there's a cue that's put out, um, a trigger that's put out of some sort, is that means, okay, that means I go to whatever and I shoot this or that, or I go and I do these things, whatever the job is. Um, the beta sex kitten, I will go and I'll be a spy and I'll go and seduce this person and find out the information and just, all these different things. It's basically ultimately, in my opinion, we're in a war, and the enemy is setting up his kingdom and his army. And the way he's doing that is getting our children so young that they don't really have a say, because whoever had authority over them made this deal.
Yeah.
So authority is very important in the spirit realm. The parents either have authority over them, or whoever the parents sold them to had authority, or whoever um, is the owner or the runner of this lab that makes them in a petri dish. Um, so that authority is very important until they get out from under that authority and they can utilize their will to start coming out of it. I mean, I can really go on. It just depends like which rabbit trail you want to go down. So it's
Well,
very complex.
it is, and you're so right. There's so many potentials and opportunities and ways that it works and ways that they use them. But for the average everyday Christian that's listening to this and be like, "Oh, this is really interesting, and I believe this, but I don't know anybody that this happened to, or there's no way this could have happened to me." At the beginning we mentioned how prevalent and more common it is. We use the words like they did this and they did that, and they're like, oh, there's no way that I'm a part of they, or my family or anybody I know is a part of they.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about that, about how prevalent it is and how most people don't even realize what they're under, or what their grandfather was a part of, or their pastor was a part of, or their coach was a part of, and how it's very easily could be a part of somebody they love lives, if not their own.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, they also were, and it just gets passed down because in a lot of ways, not always, but this can be a very generational thing, but it also can be within a lot of the organizations within our country and our world. It's something that they do, but also they kind of follow them throughout life. So, let's say that you're somebody that had this done in school, because it happens in all kinds of places, daycare, school, churches, hospital, just all kinds. So let's say you're somebody that this happened to early in your life and they follow you. And all of a sudden, there's this job and you apply and you're totally unqualified, but you get it. Well, that's not coincidence. They know they want you in that position so that they can train you more and get
Yeah.
you ready for whatever it is. But so many people come in here and they don't know. Like they know that something's off. They know that they haven't been able to totally get healed. Um, but when they encounter, the power of God and the calling, then a lot of times their parts will start coming up and they'll start sharing. Now, most of them receive it and go on the healing journey. But there is a bunch that will be like, no way, what the heck, I'm running out of here. Or, okay, I'll let you do that if you have a magic wand, but I'm not going to, look at the parts. I'm not going to look at, I'm not going to do all, trying to set the rules for the healing, and ultimately don't do it, because you have to really be surrendered and you have to be ready and willing to do the work. But one of the signs also is if you don't have your memories, if you don't have your memories as a child, something's off. You gotta, like, why don't I have my memories? And there's so many red flags. Like, I look for red flags when I'm getting to meet them and talk to them and stuff. Like, if you tell me this, that's a red flag. If you tell me that, that's a red flag. If you tell me this, there's different things that equal red flags. And if I get a bunch of them, I'm like, oh, okay. Chances are you're going to be around for a while if you're willing. So your will has to be engaged. If your will is not engaged, then, come back when it is. And I pray that nothing happens in between, because you've got to remember several of them are programmed to do a job at some point.
Mhm.
Now, I have a personal belief of what part of that, a big part of that is. I don't have, I don't have any proof. I do have a few survivors that have confirmed that. Parts of them have confirmed it. I personally think this is all towards, the end time war, and that when the Antichrist comes, they will call up the little part that believes he is the father, and that, that he loves them, even though it's a twisted love, because they don't know what love is, because, as they're abusing them, they're telling them this is love.
Mhm.
But they'll be ready to do anything for their father, because as a child,
Mhm.
all they want is a mom and a dad and a family. That, like, that's all they want, and that's what they should want. Like, that's what we need. There's studies, of course, if babies don't get some love and affection and touch, that they can just die from lack of it. So that's what they want. So they're so starved for it that he manipulates that as well. So I think that that's part of the end time war plan for the enemy. But also, meanwhile, they will activate at different things. We see it, we see things happen that you really should question why this person doesn't says he doesn't remember doing any of this. Why does this kind of stuff?
Yeah, very
So,
cool.
no idea if I answered your
You
question.
did. You did. Yeah, you did. That was great. You mentioned that was my next question is what would be some clues or some signs that maybe something had happened to people? And you mentioned not having memories early on in your childhood or things like that. And you mentioned some red flags. Any other clues or red flags that you could share that are potential indicators?
Sure. I mean, well, let's see. And I'm not trying to, like, say all Germans, but there is a red flag of German, because there is a whole Nazi thing, and
Mhm.
it, part of it went to another level when the Nazi scientists came over here after
Mhm.
World War II. So there is a lot that came from that. If their family was Freemasons, Illuminati, if they're part of the what we call the purebloods, some of these names that you hear about. Military, if they lived on a military base, went to a military daycare, things of that sort. If they, nurses, if their mother's a nurse, father's a doctor. I'm not saying about all, but I'm just
Sure.
like, when I'm looking at the red
Yeah.
flags, if they all start coming together, I'm like,
Yes.
okay.
It's a the
Yeah.
totality of circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. If they don't have the memories,
Mhm.
if they dissociate, if a lot of them don't even know that astral projection is not something that Yahweh would want them to do. And
Mhm.
so they're like, really? I'm not supposed to do that? Yeah, yeah, no, if they're astral projecting, yeah, then that would be a sign.
Mhm.
Um, I'm trying to think of what else. They moved around a lot.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah, those are
Yeah,
some of the
yeah,
keys.
that's
Yes.
great. So now taking us on the healing side of it,
Mhm.
and you mentioned a couple things as you were talking about our human will, how important that is in our choice. Uh, Yahweh, Creator God, made us with choice and not like a robot. Although the agenda is to make us more like robots and to remove humanity from us because we're made in God's image, He wants us to use our human will in this, and that's so important. So you mentioned that, but what else is needed and a part of healing and freedom?
Well, I think there has to be a desire, a real desire to come out of
Mhm.
the darkness and to be healed, because this is not easy work. Like, this can be very hard on them.
Mhm.
Be hard on the healer too, but it can be hard on them. And so you can't be just like, well, if it's not magic wand, then, I'm gonna just continue down this road. You have to have a little bit of a fighter in you, and kind of tap into that, and not be determined to not let the enemy win, and be determined to have your soul and your spirit saved, because there is a little bit of a delusion on some that they are saved
Mhm.
when they're not, because part of it is in the different fragmentations. You have the core, and then you have all these different ones. Well, there is a Christian front that is made also. And so that Christian front can pair like one of the like the most spiritual person you've ever seen, and the most, the greatest lover of Yeshua that you've ever seen. And the reality is that's just a fragment of their soul. It's not their spirit. It's not their core. It's not like, you have to really get to some of those core pieces and really show them Yeshua, and then, bring them all together in agreement with Yeshua, particularly the primary parts. Sometimes when you get the primary parts, you take like 100 piece, slivers and parts with you as they receive him. But because there can be thousands of parts.
Mhm. Yeah. And along those lines, how much, even in the Christian community, because we know ultimately God is the healer, and
Absolutely.
Jesus, Yeshua is our healer, Isaiah 61. And you've mentioned that. I've heard you before. Isaiah 61 of, he came to bind up the brokenhearted and set the captives free. And this is exactly what that means, the
Yeah,
type of ministry. It's a big piece of that, and how much a religious spirit tries to keep that from happening, let
absolutely.
alone the parts that might be programmed to as well. So, well, goodness, we could go on and on. And my goal and my heart is always to um, bring truth and awareness and resources for people who are wanting to get free. And as my podcast tagline is, get free, live full, and thank God. So
Mhm.
you are a part of Warrior, well, you are the founder, the executive director of Warrior Bride Ministries. You all have do some amazing work sessions with people. You've got training resources, you've got volunteer and donation um, opportunities on your website. So I'm going to be sure to list that so people can find out more. You've got your annual conference, training retreats, goodness. So if this is sparked, y'all, if this has touched your heart in any way, whether like um, your heart is being just opened to wanting to support a ministry like this that is boots on the ground and doing the hard work. Please take a look at what they're doing, or maybe it's starting to stir something in you, and you're like, I don't remember much before the age of 6, 7, or 8. You definitely want to take a look, and or you're starting to have some dreams or some um, things are popping up and you're wondering, is this real? Is this real, or is this my imagination? And you're wanting some trusted people to walk through that with you. Or if you heard stories about your family and you're like, and things are starting to come together. Um, she's got some great resources on her website and is doing some really good work. So I'm going to list that for you. Kelly, thank you. Thank you
Thank you.
for doing what you do, for saying yes, for being in the fight and standing with people who are ready to do the work, and giving them tools to do that. So appreciate having you.
I appreciate you having me as well. And thank you for the work you do as well. We
Yeah.
need more of us for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, y'all, if you know somebody else that needs this too, would you share it with them? And until next time, I'm Tiffany Jo Baker, and my heart and hope is that you continue to get free, live full, and thank God. Blessings. Well, friends, thank you for joining us today on the Tiffany Jo Baker podcast, where we continue to get free, live full, and thank God. If you enjoyed our time together and are taking away a nugget that has inspired your soul and success, would you share this episode with a loved one who could use it too? And if you haven't already, take a moment to rate and review this podcast. and help me help others fuel and fulfill their faith journeys. Now go do all the things God has called and created you to do with the grace and gifts God has given you.